Within 48 hours, their lives would never be the same. Having just buried one relative, the last thing they could fathom is the funeral and burial of another. The chain of events that began on February 17, 2015, will cause a ripple that would permanently change the lives of everyone involved. Hello, my name is Amina, and welcome back to another episode of Crime Addicts. Today I will be discussing the kidnapping of Noela Rukundo and the shocking events that followed, unveiling a sinister plot of kidnapping, extortion, and unsuspecting evil. But first, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you'll be alerted when I post a new video. Also, follow Crime Addicts on Instagram and TikTok, where I post past, present, and random true crime information a few times a week. Alright, now let's get back to the video. In early 2015, Noela had received news that her stepmother, who had been sick for some time, had passed away. Noela was extremely devastated because she was close to her stepmother, so the death affected her hard. She immediately decided to fly back to her birth country, Burundi, to pay her last respects and attend her stepmother's funeral. Although Noela was married and had 8 children, she elected to take the trip solo since it was the middle of the school year and she didn't want to affect the children's studies. Her husband, Balenga Kalala, agreed to stay and take care of the household and the children, so she booked her flight in her hotel and she left. Even though Noela would be surrounded by relatives and friends in Burundi, Balenga made it a point to contact Noela frequently during her trip because she was staying at a hotel and lodging there by herself. On the evening of February 17th, Noela returned to her hotel room after a long day of attending the funeral and catching up with friends and family. Overwhelmed by the day's events and feeling tired, sad, and emotionally drained, Noela decided to lay down for the night. While resting, she received a telephone call from Balenga and spoke to him about her day and vented that she wasn't feeling her best. He allowed his wife to let off her frustrations and reassure her that her stepmother was in a better place. He let her know that he and the children were doing fine and couldn't wait for her to return back home. Because she was having trouble falling asleep, he suggested that she go outside for a while to get some fresh air and to clear her head. Desperate for any relief from the heartache she felt, Noela decided to take his advice and hung up, agreeing to contact Balenga the next morning. But that phone call would never come. The next day, Balenga received a frantic call from Noela's brother. He was growing concerned because he had not spoken to Noela all day, plus she was not answering her cell phone, and her room looked as though she had not slept in it. He suggested that they file a police report to investigate the matter, but said it would cost $545 to do so. Balenga, who had also not spoken to his wife, despite many attempts to do so, agreed and immediately wired the money to her brother. Once the police were involved, they struggled to determine where Noela could be. There did not appear to be any signs of a struggle in her hotel room. Her clothes and luggage were still there, and all of her valuables were present. When police spoke to Balenga, he told them that he had last spoke to his wife the night before and relayed that she was upset about burying her stepmother. But besides that, she seemed okay. He mentioned that she said she was going outside for air, but he was unable to provide any information about where she could have gone. Over the next few days, Noela's friends and relatives prayed for the best, but embraced themselves for the worst. This was not like her to go off without saying anything, and those that knew her said she would never up and leave her 8 children and husband willingly. Noela Rukundo was born and raised in Burundi. As an adult, she got married and had 5 children, but found herself a widow when her husband unexpectedly passed away in the early 2000s. Now a single parent of 5, Noela decided to move herself and her children to a different country where they can embrace new opportunities, create new experiences, and meet new people. She decided that Australia would be the perfect place for them to relocate. In 2004, after moving to Australia and acquiring a job, Noela found that one of her biggest obstacles was the language barrier. Noela's native tongue was Swahili, and she found it difficult to grasp the English language, so it became hard for her to communicate effectively at her new job and get to know new people. A social worker helping Noela with her transition to becoming an Australian citizen became aware of this issue and referred her to someone she thought could help. Another one of her clients, who also spoke Swahili but was now fluent in English as well. This client was Balenga Kalala, and after a few tutoring sessions and light flirting between him and Noela, the two began to date. Balenga, like Noela, had also been a widow and relocated to Australia. He grew up in what was formerly known as Zaire, but is now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo. He was raised by farmer parents, and at 24, got married to a girl in his village and had a son. During this time, eastern parts of the country had been negatively affected by Rwandan genocide and long-lasting regional conflicts. In many areas, state authority had all but basically dismantled, and the country was overrun with militias and rebel groups. It was one of these rebel groups that attacked Balenga and his family, killing his wife and his child. He escaped and fled the country, staying in Botswana at a refugee camp before eventually being accepted as a refugee in Australia in 2004. He soon found a job at a seafood processing factory, and later he became a forklift operator in a warehouse. Soon after he was introduced to Noela, their relationship quickly progressed. He loved and accepted not only her, but her 5 children as well, and treated them as if they were his own. They moved into a house in a Kings Park suburb of Melbourne, got married, and had 3 more children, for a total of 8 kids altogether. They lived a seemingly happy life, which made the situation so much more tragic. Despite a body never being recovered at the time, Balenga told their family and friends back in Australia that Noela died in an accident. 5 days after her disappearance, family members and people within the community gathered at her and Balenga's home and brought food and money to assist the grieving family. By that evening, as the last guest departed the home, a figure emerged from the shadows. Balenga, completely shocked and surprised, couldn't believe his eyes. Standing in front of him was Noela, and boy did she have a story to tell. On the evening of February 17th, after speaking with her husband on the phone, Noela decided to take his advice and went outside to get some fresh air. While outside, she was soon approached by a man who pointed a gun at her and instructed her not to scream or he would kill her. She was quickly forced into a car and seated in between 2 men who both also had guns drawn. They blindfolded her with a scarf and drove for 40 minutes, where Noela was escorted into a building and tied to a chair. Although she was blindfolded, Noela could hear the men talking amongst themselves. One of the men bent down in front of her and asked her what she did that somebody wanted to kill her. Terrified and confused, Noela didn't respond because she couldn't conjure up a response. The men asked her again, "What did you do for this man to pay us to kill you?" Clueless still, Noela hysterically asked a question of her own. "Which man? I don't have any issues with anybody." Then the men said to her, "Your husband." Noela was so taken aback by the allegation that for a brief moment, she no longer cared about being bound and tied by these armed men. She was angry. She screamed back at the men that her husband wouldn't try to get her killed and called them all liars. The men began to laugh, and one of them even slapped her and called her a fool before picking up the phone and dialing the number. Once the other person answered, the leader of the gang proudly stated, "We have her," and put the phone on speaker, where Noela heard her husband reply, "Kill her." The men went on to inform her husband that the price had went up and they would need him to send more money before they finished the job. Once Balenga agreed, they told him where they would be discarding her body. Noela, in a state of shock and overwhelmed with this new revelation, passed out. When she came to a few minutes later, she had accepted that she was going to die, and her spouse of 11 years had betrayed her in the worst way imaginable. As fate would have it, although the men had accepted the almost $7,000 to kidnap and kill Noela, They didn't believe in killing women and knew her brother, so they decided to pretend to kill her and just keep the money. After 48 hours in captivity, they left Noela on the side of a road and provided her with a memory card containing recorded phone conversations of Belenga discussing the murders and receipts for 2 Western Union money transfers for $3,400. She sought assistance from the Belgian and Kenyan embassies to return to her home in Melbourne. She then got in contact with the pastor of her church and told him the story. Although he was in disbelief that Belenga was capable of this, the pastor eventually agreed to Noela's request to not tell anyone she was alive, and he helped her to get back home without Belenga's knowledge. 3 days later, Noela was back in Melbourne and had approached Belenga, who couldn't believe his eyes. She would later tell news media that initially she just stood, looking at him. He started walking slowly towards her and touched her shoulder and jumped. Then he asked if it was really her before screaming that he was sorry for everything. Noela called the police, who ordered Belenga off the premises, and she later obtained a court order against him. Days later, the police instructed Noela to call Belenga. They recorded the conversation where he made a full confession to his wife, begging for her forgiveness and revealing the reason he ordered the murder. He said he thought she was going to leave him for another man, an accusation that Noela has always denied. In September of 2015, Belenga pled guilty to incitement to murder, and in December of that year, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison, 6 without the possibility of parole. In a rather ironic twist, following the trial, Noela reported that she's been shunned by her local African community. She says she feels as though people blame her for this crime. Someone left threatening messages for her car was vandalized 3 times, and one day she returned home to find her back door broken in. In her victim impact statement, she talked of feelings of loneliness and isolation, sleepless nights, trouble eating, suicidal thoughts, panic attacks, and financial troubles. She was scared for her safety and worried about her children and her children's futures. In February 2021, Lifetime released the movie titled Death Saved My Life, starring Megan Good. The story was inspired by Noela's real-life case. So this marks the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the story of Noela and Belenga. I want to know down below in the comments if you would have been as forward as Noela was confronting your spouse that tried to have you murdered. Drop a 100 if you would have done that. I don't know if I would have been able to do that, to be totally honest. But I hope you guys really enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Please share the video, like it, and I look forward to seeing you guys at the next video. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.